What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio, transmitting from the future-free state of Greater Idaho. I am the one-armed madman, and back with me today from the Liberty Lighthouse, we've got the great Peter Serefine. Pete, pleasure as always. I'm all kinds of interested to get into the constitutionality of what's going on right now. You know, one of the things that we've been talking about on the podcast for like the last 2 weeks is like, we have a president and he's doing things, which is so abnormal from the last 4 years where we did not have a president and he didn't do anything. So it's really interesting to see like how quick they're moving and how much he just doesn't really care about respectability anymore. Like, I think in his first term, he was kind of like, I can win over the liberals. I'm going to be president for everybody, that type of thing. And now he's just like, nope, fuck this. We're going hard.
Yeah, he's going hard. Not necessarily agreeing with how he's doing some of the things he's doing, but I like the idea behind almost everything he's doing. But we'll see how it all works out.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what he's doing is going to end up in the courts and get stuck there for a long time, but we'll see.
Hey, as long as he can get the ball rolling, like even if he gets held up in courts and, you know, the courts aren't going to rule the way that we would like them to for the most part, because, you know, even a couple of the Republican, you know, on the Supreme Courts, you know, Amy Coney Barrett, she's a little bit iffy. I don't know. I don't trust any of those people anyways, but the fact that he's actually doing things and he's doing the things that he promised he was going to do is a really cool thing to see, in my opinion, anyways.
Oh yeah. It's nice to see people at least try.
Yeah.
To do what the people want them to do.
Because there's just so much corruption out there. We're going to start off with USAID, which is unbelievable to me. Like, I heard an interview with a guy named Mike Benz on Joe Rogan. It was like a month or so ago, and he was talking about USAID, and I was just thinking, like, how the hell have I never heard of this? And now that it's like come to light and they're really getting into that, it's like, how many other, you know, slush funds like USAID are out there that we have no clue about? And I would imagine there's a bunch of them, you know?
I would speculate that most of the regulatory departments in the executive branch operate in a similar manner.
Yeah. And, you know, the funny thing is all of these people who have a problem with the USAID going to hell, they're all criminals. They're all criminals, you know? They're the worst of the worst. And speaking of the worst of the worst, let's just get right into this with Bernie Sanders.
Nothing wrong with looking for waste and the kinds of bureaucracy that exist. I think we can do a whole lot to get rid of the waste, the fraud, the excessive bureaucracy that exists in government, especially, by the way, in the Defense Department. What is wrong right now is one simple reality. What Musk is doing is illegal and unconstitutional. You cannot go into an agency like USAID and essentially fire everybody and get rid of that agency. You cannot do that's an agency that was created by Congress. They want to get rid of USAID, fine. Come to the Congress, make your case. You can't do it unilaterally. You cannot withhold U.S. funds that were appropriated for Medicaid, for community health centers, for Head Start. You cannot put a freeze on that. That money was appropriated by the Congress. And as I hope every fourth grader in America knows, Congress holds the purse strings.
Well, first of all, that's a lie. It was not created by Congress. It was created by executive order by JFK a couple of years before he got killed. Anyways, what do you think about the constitutionality of all of this? Let me hear.
There's a lot to go in there. First off, let's pretend for a minute that Bernie's right, and it was, like most executive branch agencies, created by Congress. Okay, they create it, and then they basically hand it over to the president to run and operate. So if the president wants to take it down to, you know, one person, you know, he can do that. I mean, you could argue that whatever the mandate was in the creation, the whatever law that was passed that created said department, any department, Department of Education, for example, law passes, it has a mandate, the mandate is X. Well, obviously they don't stick to just X, they go to XYZ and then start the alphabet all over again That's how our government has gotten to the size that it is. But the president, as the chief executive, should be able to strip any agency he wants down to the bare minimum number of people required to do whatever X in the original document was. Anything beyond that, going, completely eliminating a department, for example, now you're getting questionable because it was created by Congress. But you don't have to go along with the expansion. Anything that they're doing that's not in the original document that created it is beyond the scope and therefore can be cut by the president at will. The appropriations of money thing that Bernie spoke of is funny to me because he's making the argument that Congress said you have to spend this money, and that to not spend this money is a violation of the Constitution. Okay.
That's some weird commie logic.
Yeah, well, not only that, money not getting spent on what it's supposed to be spent on or not being spent at all is an everyday occurrence in our government. I mean, we had COVID funds that were still floating around there when Biden was in his last days of office trying to spend every last penny of it.
Yeah.
Just because it's appropriated doesn't mean it gets spent. And the difference between, all right, you and I, when we talk about the Constitution, we're talking about, the 2,500 words of the original Constitution, maybe the 4,500 words if you add the 27 different amendments to it. The problem with our government is they operate on something called the annotated Constitution, which, if you're watching in video form, I'm holding up a book that is almost 4 inches thick. This is the Constitution and every Supreme Court decision that interprets the Constitution. And this is what they go by. This is 2,600 pages long. And this is what Congress reads when they try to figure out if they have the power to do something.
It's what they pretend to read.
Yeah, what they pretend to read, or what they have some staffer read.
Yeah. So I had a question about executive orders just in general. How much power does the president actually hold in the Constitution? Is there anything in there about executive orders? Does it have anything to do with the unitary executive theory that was kind of pushed forth within the George Bush administration? And how long have they been doing this?
Well, George Washington had executive orders.
Okay.
It's been around. They've been around forever. But for the first 100 years or so, the executive orders were basically directives to the executive branch employees to say, follow the law this way. This is how I want you to do this. What we have now is morphed into, the last administration signing executive orders saying, well, don't follow the law. For example, immigration law.
Yeah.
The actual immigration law passed by Congress says that if you get caught crossing a border outside of a port of entry, you are to be detained, processed, and deported. There's no catch and release. There's no come back 3 years from now for a court date. That's not what the law says. So an appropriate executive order would be to, clarify what do they mean by detained? Like, how long can you detain them? Say, yes, they're to be captured and detained, but I want them processed and out of the country within 48 hours. That would be an appropriate executive order. But an executive order that contradicts the law that was passed, i.e., release them into the United States instead of deporting them, that is an unconstitutional act. That is a violation of the oath of office of whoever signed it. And that's something that should outrage everybody. If we don't have the rule of law of the United States Constitution, we don't have a republic.
Yeah. And this USAID thing, it's supposed to be giving money out to countries to improve our national position, our global position. It's to help us. It's not supposed to be charity, from what I understand. Right. And it's turned into not only charity, but just like a slush fund. I could go and read the big long list of all the weird DEI stuff that has gone into this, but everybody's heard it all at this point. So I don't think I really need to do that. I did hear an interesting one as I was doing production for this episode. This was from Nancy Mace. She was talking in Congress. They spent over $10 million on creating this is unbelievable, but again, this is the United States government, so nothing is unbelievable at this point. They were spending money on creating transgender mice, rats, and monkeys and seeing if they could get them pregnant.
It's like the old joke of the, giving cocaine to shrimp on treadmills. Like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
Like, what's the point? Why are
Yeah.
you wasting government money on these things?
Yeah, they were actually giving those ones GHB to test if they could get pregnant while on date rape and all this other
There you
wild stuff. So they're thinking along the same lines as you there, Pete.
Along the idea of USAID, I wrote an article, I don't know, a few weeks ago that goes how I think all foreign aid should be handled in this country. The Constitution clearly spells out how a treaty works, right? The president has the power to negotiate a treaty with a foreign nation, and he often delegates that power to the Secretary of State or the ambassador of some country or whatever. But eventually, the president has to sign said treaty. Then said treaty has to get approved by the Senate. And if I remember right, it has to be a 2/3 approval. I could be wrong.
That makes sense to me. I've heard the 2/3 thing before.
But they have to be approved by the Senate. So no agency, in my opinion, no individual, no department should be allowed to give money to a foreign country outside of a treaty obligation. Any money that you give to somebody else should be treated like a treaty. The president says, I want to give money to, whatever for transgendered rats or whatever you just said.
Yeah.
That should have to get congressional or Senate approval before it can be done.
Yep.
If we treat all foreign aid like a treaty, most of our foreign aid will either stop or at least become reasonable.
Yeah. And I'm going to give a shout out to my grandfather here who's been talking about zero-based budgeting my entire adult life. Like, if we could go to zero-based budgeting with this type of shit, just imagine all of the waste we would eliminate. And for people who don't know, zero-based budgeting is essentially you set a budget at the beginning of the year, you account for every single cent that goes out, and then next year you create a new budget and you start at zero. And that would be a major, major improvement for all of this stuff. It's probably never going to happen because, it's just like when Rand Paul gets up and says we should have an inspector general oversee all of the money that we're giving to Ukraine so that it doesn't go into, cocaine yachts and houses in the Palisades. A bunch of Ukrainians lost their homes in the Palisades fire. That's, something that nobody's really talking about. And you can't even get that. You can't even get an inspector general. And now Zelensky's coming out and saying we haven't even gotten half the money.
Of course they haven't.
Mm-hmm. That money was never for them. That was money for us. This whole war is about money for us, resources for us. And now like Trump's getting into this deal where I don't like that he's putting like resources on collateral to continue this war. That's kind of what happened in World War II when we leveraged the UK so freaking hard that we ended up having to take their bank because they were never going to be able to pay that money back. And once we took the bank, it was like, well, now we have to go win the war. Otherwise, the bank is worthless. And I could see that happening now.
We all know that pretty much every war that America has fought, at least in the last 100 years, has just been money. Mm-hmm. It's all about money. It's about it's about the defense contractors and their money. It's about the lobbyists that go to Congress and say, well, if you did this, we could give you X amount of dollars. It's about the Congress people that own stocks and shares in these defense contracts or own defense contracting companies or even dual use companies. It's all about money. It's always been about money.
Money, resources, and drugs.
Yeah.
They like even within this USAID, they're funding the opium poppy fields in Afghanistan. Still today, they're funding Afghanistan. We just fought a war with them. Why the hell would we be funding the people that we just fought a war with?
Oh, but you're not funding the government. You're funding the the civilians.
Oh yeah, and money's not fungible either.
Right. Money isn't fungible. That's the thing that nobody ever wants to admit.
Yeah.
Money being fungible. I use the Planned Parenthood thing all the time. You know, people are like, "Oh, yes, we give them millions of dollars every year, but they can't use it for abortions." I'm like, "You're right, they can't." So if I give you $1,000 a month and say that you can only use it on your utility bills, what's that do to your budget?
Yeah.
Well, now you don't have to spend your money on utility bills. Your money can go to, hookers and blow.
Yeah. Yep. There was just like I'm a motocross guy, and there's this very powerful agent that just got taken down by Wasserman, this big, company that handles sports, agencies, and it's he had an account that he created. You had to pay this account off before it went to anywhere else, and he used the account for personal things. But as he explained, he was like, "This account is tied to my salary, so if I don't, you know, make this account what it's supposed to be at the end of the year, it just comes out of my salary. So it's not stolen money." And by the end of it, I was just like, yeah, money is fungible.
Right.
That's the answer. You can use it however you want to do it. It doesn't really matter as long as your balance sheet checks out,
And that's what we do. Like I again, another article that I wrote a long time ago. I think it was in one of my books.
Mhm.
It was in the So Simple Even a Politician Can Understand. There is absolutely no reason for our federal government to ever give a penny to any nonprofit organization.
Yeah.
A nonprofit organization is a charity, and if I want to give my money to a charity, I will give my money to a charity. There's no reason for you to, rob it from me in the form of income tax and then give it to a charity.
Yeah, and find me a charity that's actually doing the work that they're advertising that they're doing and not paying out their executives millions of dollars a year. You can't find one. My grandfather paid charity for his entire life. He's given money to charity. And in this last year, he's like, "I'm done. They've been wasting my money. I was stupid. I shouldn't have given it to this or that. And at this point, I can't find anything that I feel is straight up and honest about what they're doing with my money. So now they're not going to get it anymore."
Yeah, I give a pretty good chunk to St. Jude. It's probably the
Ah,
thing I support more than anything else.
yeah, no, that's probably a decent charity. Like I was in the burn unit for 4 months. Like these people do God's work. The people working in these hospitals in St. Jude's, like the burn unit was the worst place on earth. There was a little girl in there that got macaroni and cheese boiling down her. And man, like she was so small and she was growing so fast that every time they took her into, like stretch and everything, you break her skin apart. And it's just like, it's the worst place in the world. And they need money. Like I have a second hand today because the Air Force was testing certain medications and certain burn therapies in the hospital that I was in. Without that, I don't have this hand,
Wow.
So things do happen for the good from time to time, but for the most part, these are slush funds. And these people who are funding them are criminals, like complete criminals.
I agree.
Well, let's move on to the big one here that everybody's just all kinds of happy about. 14th Amendment. I had a video set up, but I found a better one. So this is really fun. You're gonna love this woman.
Constitution thumpers. Where are you guys at? Are you guys really mad about Trump's executive order that's in direct violation of the 14th Amendment? Oh, what's that? You don't know what that means? Because you've never actually read the Constitution, even though you love to throw out that things are unconstitutional. On top of that, even if you did read it, you don't know how to interpret it. Yeah, are you guys mad about that? I expect that you're really, really mad. Oh, you're not? Oh, is that because you're racist? Oh, okay.
I mean, what
That
a
had
smug, ridiculous statement.
Well, I've got two different theories on this. First, let's go with the text of the 14th Amendment.
Okay.
14th Amendment ratified on July 9th, 1868, Section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state where they reside. The subject to this jurisdiction thereof is basically the part that Trump is acting on. He's saying if you are not, your parents are not, if nobody in the lineage is an American citizen, then you are not subject to this jurisdiction of the United States. If back in, let's say, 1868, if you are a British person and you come to the United States, you are subject to the jurisdiction of the king or queen. I don't know what it was at that time, not of the United States. You can go back and read the writings of the people who put together the 14th Amendment, and they'll tell you as much. This was never meant to be the chain migration tool that it is today. So that's where Trump is going. He says he's not really technically ending birthright citizenship. You have to remember the context of the 14th Amendment. It was to grant citizenship and all of the rights of citizenship to the freed slaves and their children. That's where the jurisdiction thereof part comes in, because they had been here, they had resided here for a length of time against their will, and were subject to the jurisdiction of their owners who were citizens. So it all had to do with that. That was the purpose of this amendment. I have another idea. My idea, again, something I wrote about at Liberty Lighthouse. Um, let's take it out of the hands of the courts. Let's not worry about the interpretation. Let's just say, all right, they're right. Anybody born in the United States is a citizen, fine. So you got Mr. and Mrs. illegal alien sneak across the border. They have a kid in the United States, and at the hospital, somebody should say, well, congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. illegal alien. Your kid is a United States citizen. Now you've got a choice to make. You can leave your child here and we will find somebody to foster them, or you can take them home with you because you are not a citizen and you are being deported. Your citizen child can return to the United States at the age of 18 as a citizen and be granted all the rights of citizenship. But until then, get out.
Yeah. I heard Tom Hallman, somebody asked him, you're going to separate families and children? He goes, no, the children can be deported with the families. And then you get the Dr. Dre and the glasses and the joint, which I always enjoy.
And it's also, come on, let's be real. We separate children from families all the time.
Yeah.
It's an everyday occurrence in this country, and it only is a, oh my God, issue when it's an illegal immigrant. We do it, you go get go get a couple of DUIs. You're going to be separated from your family when you're thrown in jail.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no bleeding hearts over that.
No, it's, evil people have a way with words, and the Constitution is a funny thing because, like you said, in thereof, like that one tiny little statement can have so many ramifications. And like the commies have always been really good at manipulating language. That's something that, what's his name? The left-wing communist guy. I don't remember now. Anyways, big commie. He's always talked about language. He wrote a book about language and how they weaponize language. And you get these smug people like this woman that we just played on the internet who are completely ignorant to anything that has to do with the Constitution, but they hear a couple little words and then it just spreads like wildfire.
Yeah.
You always see on like TikTok, there's phrases that get repeated,
Yeah.
I can't think of any off the top of my head, but it's always this phrase that gets repeated. And you wonder, like, where did that phrase originate from? Who decided that this was the message that we were going to go with? And then how does it get propagated from there? Because it has to be a top-down thing. And I think a lot of, like, TikTokers especially, they're trying to go viral. They're trying to do the same thing that I'm doing, trying to get their message out to as many people as they possibly can. And I think they have probably grabbed those words. Oh, this person said that. Now I'm going to repeat it and kind of get some play off of that. But I still think that, like, there's some evil people on top who are weaponizing this type of shit through language.
Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, it's people grabbing phrases, this person did this video that said this thing.
Exactly.
And they got, thousands and thousands of views. So I'm going to try it and see what I get.
Yep.
I have the problem of TikTok and Facebook and anywhere I go, I have over 11,000 followers on my TikTok page. But any video I post, I'm lucky if 500 people see it.
Yeah. It's weird,
So,
right? And like, I
yeah,
don't know about you, but I, like, as a podcaster, I'm very critical of other podcasts. And I'm
yeah.
very aware of how hard it is to have a big podcast. Like, this is the first thing I've ever done in my life that I haven't been successful at. Like, every other thing that I've tried in my life, I've been good at it and I've been successful at it. I think that I have a good podcast. I bring people like you on. I have great, conversations with my co-hosts. Like, I feel like this is a good podcast. And then I see other people that are on Twitter, or, you see clips on Twitter, and he's like, these people are boring. They're not saying anything that anybody else hasn't already said. And how the fuck does it have hundreds of thousands of views? It's not organic. There's no way.
Nope. No, it's, and that's part of the argument of all of the social media platforms. It's those algorithms.
Yeah.
Somebody somewhere had to program that algorithm to decide what they want to push, whatever agenda that is.
Yeah. That's the
You know,
only thing that TikTok has that's worth anything is their algorithm. That's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
They want to get that algorithm and use it for themselves. And an interesting thing I heard about TikTok recently, there was a great breakdown of it. I don't remember where I saw it. It might have been on No Agenda podcast. But anyways, they were now I just lost it. I got brain damage. Sorry. I don't remember what I was saying. Oh, it was a TikTok. It's essentially QVC in China. That's how everybody buys things. Is they buy everything off of TikTok. They're buying clothing from one of the influencers that they like. They're buying food from another. And like, that's a very valuable thing that we haven't been able to figure out in the US yet. Like,
I
Instagram
don't know
has
who
it a
would
little bit.
ever. I don't know who would ever try to sell products when they, show up on videos and podcasts, TikToks, shows. Nobody would ever do
No.
things like that.
No. All right. I got another video here. This is from Rep. Dave Min, a Democrat in Irvine, and he's talking about foreign aid in general.
Learn about the Constitution in elementary school, and we learn that Congress, not the president, has the exclusive authority to appropriate and spend money. Now, if the president doesn't like how we're spending money, he has the option of asking Congress to change that. And he has majorities in both the House and the Senate, so that shouldn't be too hard to do. But what he's doing right now is blatantly illegal. The problem is that congressional Republicans are refusing to stand up for the rule of law. And so President Trump is testing the Constitution, and he's breaking the rule of law over and over and over. But we are in a constitutional crisis right now because the president's breaking the law, and there are no consequences for that. But I want to be clear, this is not just an abstract constitutional law crisis. It's a crisis that's already, within one day, 24 hours, having real and often terrifying consequences for actual people in this country, including in the district I represent. Now, my
Yep. There he is. Blatantly illegal.
Yeah, blah blah blah. Again, we're getting, yes, Congress is the one that appropriates funds, but what do they appropriate them to? If did the bill that funded USAID last time around, did it specify that X number of dollars had to go to this place and X number of dollars had to go to this place and this? Probably not. It probably said give X amount of dollars to USAID. Okay, well, that's the end of what Congress did. So they gave the money to USAID, and now the president has decided that USAID needs to go away. Worst case scenario, that money goes back to Congress for reappropriation.
You know what's funny about this USAID thing that is really aggravating to me is that two parts, actually. The people running this thing think that they're, I don't know, an NGO or a private entity,
Right.
that they don't have to answer to anybody for anything and they can just do whatever the fuck they want with this money. And how dare you, come in and tell us how we should be spending our money. And it's like, the thing that really made me mad is you got Elizabeth Warren and a couple other people, Wyden, all these fuckers that I can't stand, standing out in front of USAID screaming about Donald Trump. And you've got normal people, thousands of them, gathered around cheering. And it's like every one of those people are struggling. I know they are, because everybody in this country is struggling unless you're in the protected class or you're close to the money. But they're literally standing up there demanding that they can do whatever the fuck they want with our money. It's like there's this disconnect in this commie mindset where they just can't grasp that this is why you are struggling, because we are giving all of your money away to different countries for stupid things. And it's like, how do you keep supporting your own tyranny?
Yeah, and they do it, and the people don't get it.
And then they'll be smug and tell us that we're idiots and we don't know how to, if you even read the Constitution, you don't know how to interpret it.
Well, and that's the thing, a lot of what President Trump is doing, I'm hoping, is going to get people to read the Constitution again. How many people are going to whip out the 14th Amendment and read that "and subject to the jurisdiction thereof" line that keeps getting ignored by the media? Like that. Okay, maybe there's some interpretation there. You want to argue about "and subject to the jurisdiction thereof"? You want to argue about what that means? Fine.
Yeah, have it out in court.
Yeah, whatever. But you can't just say that what he's doing is wrong. I mean, unconstitutional. You can't just say what he's doing is unconstitutional, because there's a clear argument to be had that it's perfectly constitutional. Now, of course, if you go by the Constitution that the government uses and you go through the case law, they're going to say, well, that's not how we've been doing it for the last 100 years. Quite frankly, I don't give a crap.
Yeah, that's a logical fallacy.
Yeah. And again, the most recent thing I put up on
Field of
Liberty
tradition. That's what it was. Yeah.
I call the stare decisis and the let it stand, the idea of court precedents. Now, I'd call it basically a 240-year game of telephone. Each judge is interpreting what the last judge said on the topic. Nobody's going back, stripping away all the court cases and reading what the founders meant.
Yeah.
That's all that really matters, is what the founders meant and what the people at the time understood.
Yeah. I heard a great story from RFK recently. He was talking about his Monsanto case, and he said he brought his wife with him to one of the days that they were doing court, and Monsanto had their expert there. And he went through everything. And he said by the end of the day, his wife was like, "Why are you suing these people? Like, they're clearly doing what they're supposed to do. Like, this guy is an expert and he's saying all this is like, it seems like you're wasting these people's time." And he goes, no. Come back again tomorrow. I'm going to have my expert in here and they're going to tell you the exact opposite. So it's like, it's very easy to have a lawyer or a judge that can see these things in completely different ways. We have it all the time,
Right. But the problem with the whole lawyers and judges interpreting the Constitution is it was we, the people, that ratified it.
Yeah.
It was our understanding and our interpretation at the time that we ratified it. It should be the only interpretation that matters.
Yeah. And there's another problem, which is activist judges. You've
Right.
got the Open Society with George Soros, who his mission has been to get in activist prosecutors and activist judges to literally destroy the country from within. And a lot of that money came from USAID. So it's not even like people think that he's spending his own money to do this, but he's not. He's creating NGOs and he's creating all this bullshit. And then he's using our money to literally destroy the country from within. It's so evil.
You remember 4 years ago, right when President Biden took office, the massive caravan of people that came to the southern border wearing Biden-Harris T-shirts?
I'd tell them to rush the border.
Yeah. Where do you think those T-shirts came from?
Yeah. And all the printed signs. I mean, anytime you go in these protests, the Summer of Love, any of these organized protests, they've all got professionally printed signs. It's another one that people need to watch for,
I just found out this one bothered me because the American Red Cross is one of the organizations that has been helping guide migrants through Mexico to the United States. A lot of people out there think very highly of the American Red Cross. That's not part of their mission.
No, not at all.
And it shouldn't be.
No. I've got another video here from the about the Department of Labor, and I think this will tie in really well to the article that you read today.
What an attempted coup in the digital era looks like.
Hundreds have gathered outside the U.S. Department of Labor to protest Musk's illegal takeover of the government. With no authority, Musk is hacking critical programs like personal management and treasury payments.
This is money in the Department of Labor that goes for worker health and safety, that goes for job training, that goes for equal opportunity, that goes for apprenticeship programs, that goes for enforcing job quality across the country. That's what he's stealing.
Government employee unions and labor groups sued the U.S. District Court to prevent Musk's illegal access to DOL systems and wrongful terminations.
He's already done this at the Department of Treasury. He's done this at USAID. He's going agency by agency. This is, of course, unconstitutional. It is illegal. This is Elon Musk trying to function as a co-president of the United States. We are going to fight them tooth and nail.
All right, so I think the Department of Labor is a commie institution that needs to be abolished immediately. He's talking about apprenticeships. I was an apprentice lineman. You know how I became an apprentice? I paid $30,000 to go to school and become a pre-apprentice, and then I got a job as an apprentice. I don't see how the Department of Labor has anything to do with that.
I was just going to say, he's calling what Musk is doing unconstitutional. I would call the Department of Labor unconstitutional. It's not one of the things authorized by the Constitution for the federal government to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not there. And I mean, the closest thing you might be able to point to is the Interstate Commerce Clause. But interstate commerce only applies to goods and services crossing state lines. So, no, that doesn't even work. That's, again, the problem with interpretation and the expansion that we, the people, have allowed to get away with. Our federal government does way too many things that they were never supposed to do. There shouldn't be a Department of Education. There shouldn't be a Department of Labor. There shouldn't be a Department of Transportation. In fact, two examples for you. The first federal Department of Education was in the late 1800s. I want to say 1870-ish. And it was created to basically grade and judge the education that was going on throughout the Union post-Civil War. But it was only around for a couple of years before Congress decided that, no, a federal cabinet level Department of Education has too much power and is unconstitutional, and demoted that office or to the Office of Education from Department of Education. So that's one example. We learned our lesson in 1870-ish, but then, threw it away in 1979 and started over. The other one, Department of Transportation.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to point at is the bonus bill veto by James Madison. James Madison, of course, the guy who penned the Constitution, who's famous for taking all of the notes of the ratification debates and of the constitutional debate itself. James Madison's president. His last day as president, a bill comes to the president's desk called the bonus bill. And the bonus bill is basically funding infrastructure, canals and roads, with federal money. Now, Madison was president during the War of 1812. He knows the importance of infrastructure. He could have, remember, a president has 10 days to decide whether or not to sign a bill once it hits his desk. He got it the last day he was in office. He could have left it on his desk for Adams to deal with and just been done with it, and there would have been nothing wrong with that. But he vetoed it. Knowing how important infrastructure was, he vetoed the bill anyway. And he wrote in his veto, if the people want the government to fund infrastructure, not the word he used, but
Yeah.
to fund infrastructure, then they need to amend the Constitution. So he recognized it as unconstitutional, vetoed the bill. But yet here we are, we have a federal Department of Transportation.
Yeah. And it's like these programs should be used to improve transportation, to make it better. more roads, better infrastructure, fixing it. But it does the exact opposite. It makes it harder to build everything. In Northern California, where I grew up, there was a 2-lane highway from Navarro to Santa Rosa. It's right outside of San Francisco. And it was a fucking nightmare. It would funnel down from 4 lanes to 2. And it just, you sat there forever. They were working on widening that my entire life. It took them 25 years to figure it out. It went over budget so many times. Like they always start out with a small bid, and you know, this will take 5 years and $10 million. 20 years and $50 million later, they're asking for another grant or something. You know what I mean? It's just disgusting.
Like the high-speed rail in California that they've spent billions and billions of dollars on. They've got like 160 feet or something like that.
They built a train station for that in the town that I grew up in the early 90s. Still to this day, a train has never passed through it, and they've remodeled it 3 different times, and now they use it as a bus stop.
All right, first off, tell me anything, and I mean anything, that the federal government has ever done effectively and efficiently.
Nothing. Anytime they try to improve things and make it cheaper, it always gets more expensive and worse. That's what they do.
Well, and that's not just the American government either. I got it right before we came on. I saw a cute little video. I think it was on Facebook.
Yeah.
So this, what? I can't remember. I want to say Czech town, and it was a European town. I want to say Czechoslovakia, but I'm not sure. Where they have been for 5 years. They have been studying building dams because of this marshland that has dried out and everything's dead.
Yeah.
For years, they've been like 5 years. They've been studying this thing. They're ready to spend probably close to $1 billion to put all these multiple small dams in to reflood this marshland. You know what happened? A family of beavers moved to town in 2 days, made 8 dams, and the Czech people were like, the government has been trying to do this for 5 years. And the government officials are like, oh yeah, and they did it better than we would do. They chose better locations than we would have.
That's hilarious. You know, I'm always big on energy because I was a lineman, and it's just my thing has been energy for a while. Like I'm always concerned about energy. So in the end of the 40s, after the end of World War II, almost 0 farms in this country had electricity. By 1960, almost every farm in the country had electricity. They were building 200,000 miles of power lines a year in that time period.
Who was paying for it?
And how many do you think we built last year? How many miles do you think? Just take a guess.
I don't know. I mean, it's not a zero-sum number because there's
55 miles.
Oh my God.
55 miles. They've done like the best thing about this election, I think, is that the tech bros realized they need energy if they want to build AI, and they kind of had to make a 180. You can't really go all in on climate change and windmills and solar panels if you want to build AI. Like, you're going to have to drill for that. And I don't know who realized it, but it got around quick, and these guys are all in on energy now, which is one of the best things that could happen to this country. If we can just start producing energy, we have like 60% of the power lines in this country are beyond their 50-year life expectancy.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't have enough people to build new lines and replace the old lines. We have to just keep building whatever we can, but they're just limiting us. Like linemen, when I went to school, they told me that there was 50% of the electrical industry was within 10 years of retirement. And that number's gotten worse down the line. And now you've got every fucking guidance counselor in this country telling kids who should be working construction to go to college because construction's a terrible job. It's just, we're shooting ourselves in the foot constantly.
Have been for a long time. I'm glad I never went to college. I didn't do it for any particular reason. I was smart enough. I could have gone. I had the grades. I could have gone.
Yeah.
I decided that I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I refused to go to college and spend $1 gazillion and get a degree and not use it.
Yes.
So
I had to go to college after I got hurt. It was retraining and they paid me to go. I ended up with a liberal arts degree because I fell behind in business in the last semester. There's not a single job in this state that I could get that would, with that degree, that would pay me more than bartending because I was a bartender. Like, not one. I guarantee there's not a single job that, oh, we're going to hire you because of that degree. It's not going to pay me as much as bartending at a shitty bar down the street.
nope. And it's, yeah. So, I dodged a bullet, but not because of some, brilliant enlightenment of my part.
Yeah.
It was just, I didn't want to get a degree that I wouldn't use, and then never decided what I wanted to do, and just ended up in the restaurant business and spent my life there.
Yeah, and it's not a bad gig, It could be better, it could be worse. Like I have had a lot of fun. I learned a lot about business. I learned a lot about life working in restaurants. I didn't know anything about economics or government in my last restaurant job. I was working in San Francisco, but I had enough common sense from working in restaurants to figure things out. So when I started working in San Francisco at a bar, minimum wage was like $10.50 an hour. And at one point, they were going to raise it to $15, and all the waitresses are so fired up. Oh, we're going to make so much more money. And I'm like, you guys are crazy. You're not going to make much more, and your hourly doesn't matter. Your tips is what matters. All this is going to do is fire the bottom, 5 servers that suck. You're going to get less hours and less overtime. And they ended up firing the dishwasher, so we had to wash our own dishes too. It's one of those things where, and I remember the waitress that I really had it out with, like a year later, she was like, you were right about that minimum wage thing. I don't know what I was thinking. And it's like, yeah, once you see it for what it is and you like logically go through it in your mind, okay, why did I think this was going to work and why didn't it work? And it's pretty easy to figure out if you're actually open-minded and want to know the answer instead of just being an ideologue that goes left no matter what. You know what I mean? Let's get into this article that you wrote. This was great.
Okay.
I'm going to read just this beginning part, and then we'll get in because I thought this was great. Modern political discourse has long characterized fascism as the far right and communism as the far left, implying their ideological opposites. However, when examined through the lens of government control versus individual liberty, it becomes clear that both fascism and communism belong on the far left of the political spectrum, not as opposites, but as rival factions of a collectivist ideology. That's great. I've always said that fascism and communism are two sides to the same coin.
I liken it to, like Catholics and Protestants. They're both Christians. They disagree around the edges, but the core beliefs are the same. And I think communism and fascism is the same thing. They disagree on how to achieve the ends, but the end goal is the same.
Central control.
Yeah, centralized control. A lot of people don't understand the whole left-right paradigm, where it came from, and especially fascism, how it got labeled on the right. That part's funny. So after the French Revolution, when they were trying to set up things, they had this giant meeting, and I can't remember the name of it right now. But in the room, the people that supported the king, so the monarchists, sat on the right, and the common people, the Jacobins, the revolutionaries, sat on the left. Now, if you think about French table manners, the guest sits to the left of the host. So they were on the left because they were the guests. So that's where the left-right comes from.
I never do that. That's really interesting.
So then when communism comes around and kind of starts to, really become a big thing, they proudly embraced the left label. They were like, we are the people. And so they proudly embraced the left. And that's where the left side of the political spectrum came from. But the right side didn't really have a thing until World War II. World War II comes around, and here we are, the liberty-loving American republic that we are, and we've got to ask the commies to help us fight the fascists. Now, how do we do that? Well, how do we do that and save face? Well, we decided to label the fascists as far right to make them look like they're the opposite of the commies, so that we don't feel bad asking the commies to help us. So World War II, Russia is one of our allies to defeat the fascists Mussolini and Hitler, and that label somehow stuck that the fascists are far right, but it's completely made up. It was just so that the American people wouldn't feel bad siding with the commies.
And it seems like the definition of fascism has changed in popular culture. Like, I know my definition for fascism was the lucrative merger of corporation and state. That was what Mussolini called it. I think I've heard that over and over again, but I don't think I don't think that most leftists even know what fascism is. To them, it's
Yeah,
just a buzzword that they use as person I don't like.
most people today use it as a almost as a synonym to dictatorship,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
and they don't understand the system itself, and I don't think they care to understand the system. Long argued that a better left-right paradigm would be, uh, on the right side, you have no government at all,
Mhm.
just complete and utter
That's me,
anarchy.
anarcho-capitalist.
And then on the left side, you have complete, total government control of every aspect of everything in your life. And then every form of government falls somewhere in that scale.
Yeah.
And in that
You either
scale,
have liberty or varying degrees of communism.
right. So on the far right, you've got anarchy, and then slightly above that, you'll have like the libertarians,
Mhm,
and then slightly above that, you'd have somebody like me who's a constitutionalist,
mhm.
who believes that yes, we need a government, but a government should only do these things.
Yes.
And then as you move up the scale, eventually you get to the communists and the fascists that are going to be side by side on that scale. The only real difference between communism and fascism is the communists take control of everything, including property. The fascists let you keep your property as long as you do with it what they want you to do.
Yeah.
So they still
Indentured
have,
servitude, but with a paycheck.
yeah. So they still have complete control, but you actually get to keep your property and maybe make a little bit of money.
Yeah. And that's where like the Department of Labor comes in. Is all they're doing is slowing production. They're making rules to slow production. ESG is another big one. I've called ESG a cap on small business because if you don't play by the rules, you're never going to go from a small business to a large business. It's just
Yep,
not going to happen.
that's right. And most of our government, you know, in the last 100 years, we've gone from a pretty liberty-focused republic to a pretty socialist republic. A lot of what we do is very, very socialist controlling, and that is exactly the type of thing that our Constitution was written so that we, the people, have the tools to fix it,
Yeah.
to hold our government accountable to the things that they are and are not allowed to do.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is why they stopped teaching the Constitution in schools.
I love that smug woman. She's like, we all learned about it in grade school. I never learned about the Constitution, period.
Well, I learned a little bit in
Period.
grade school, but I
I
didn't
did
learn
not.
enough to think about the understanding of it. Like, yeah, we were taught that there are three branches of government and maybe a little bit about what each branch does, but we weren't taught the philosophical foundations behind it. We weren't taught about John Locke and Montesquieu. And once you learn about them, then you really understand the Constitution and why it is the way it is. And if you don't understand the why, then you don't really care. I,
Yeah.
here's a cute little example. I'm in high school and I worked at Wendy's. And Wendy's had a pressurized deep fryer, and there was a dead weight valve on this deep fryer. And the dead weight valve was just what it sounds like. It was just a big heavy weight that if the pressure got too big inside of the fryer, the pressure would lift the weight and release some pressure.
Yeah. Like a radiator cap.
Kind of like a lot like a radiator cap. Um, so part of the duty of cleaning the fryer every night was to unscrew the cap and clean that dead weight valve. Because if it's got grease goo in there,
Yeah.
it might not lift up when it's supposed to. Of course, nobody ever taught me that when I was in high school working at Wendy's. Well, years later, I go in the Navy, I get out of the Navy, I come back and I go back to Wendy's and I'm a manager. And when I learned that through management, I understood what that thing was for and why it was so important. I made sure that I taught every one of my employees to clean that dead weight, because if they don't, the thing might freaking explode.
Yep. Yep.
And
I
you know what? Every employee I ever had always cleaned that dead weight valve because they understood its importance.
Yeah.
We, the American people, no longer understand the importance of our constitutional foundations.
Yep. I used to, as a bartender, the last bar I worked in was a nightmare. I was always a fan of hiring within. Give me a waitress that knows our system, and I'll turn her into a great bartender in a couple of days. You know, we'd always hire new bartenders. They have all this experience, but all really experience is experience with bad habits, you know, and I hated having to break bad. One of my biggest things was you have to set up a well the proper way.
Yeah.
There's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and we're going to do it the right way because you suck at your job, and I always have to come back and help you, and I don't want to figure out your stupid fucking well design that you came up with in order to help you. You're going to do it my way, or you're not going to work here, you know? And it's not as dangerous as the shut off, but it's the same principle. Economy of movement, there's a right and a wrong way to do things, and if you don't understand why we're doing it this way, then you're out of here, because you need to know why we're doing things. You can't just do it and not know.
Right. You set up the well, all 5 white liquors in a row.
Yep.
In a specific order. The tequila and the triple sec are side by side, so
Yep.
that when you go to make a margarita, you can pick them
Grab
up
'em
with one
both.
hand. Like, yeah.
Yep.
I get it.
Yeah, you get it. You totally get what I'm saying. Most people don't understand that because they've never bartended before. It's like, who cares? They don't even know what a well is. But like, there is a right and a wrong way to do things.
Right. And you know, if you set it up the same way as the next person sets it up, when you go, hey, I need some help,
I can
they
do
can
it.
come back there and they can jump right in and they can help, and they don't have to think about, well, where does Johnny store the tequila?
Exactly. That stuff drove me nuts. We've got a couple more bullet points here that you wanted to cover. Do you have time to go into overtime here, or do you got to get rolling?
Sure.
Cool.
No,
Let's do this. Abolition of the Electoral College.
That's become a hot topic lately.
It has.
I keep seeing a lot about people talking about abolishing the Electoral College. Those people are all freaking morons.
Mhm.
We are not a democracy. We were never supposed to be a democracy. We are far more democratic now than our founders intended. And people say, well, maybe the founders didn't know about democracy. They knew about democracy. They called it tyranny of the majority. They feared democracy almost as much as they feared a new king.
Democracy was a dirty word for a long time.
Yeah, it really was. And the idea of abolishing the Electoral College basically makes the president popularly elected. Well, that again destroys the foundations of
Yeah.
our Constitution.
Then you're
Our
just the United
Constitution-
States of California and New York.
Right. Well, not only that, but our Constitution was set up with 3 federal jobs that we elect. One is your representative for your district that you elect directly. And he serves for 2 years. And then the Senate. Your senators were supposed to be elected by your legislatures in your state. So you elect your legislatures, your legislature elects your senator, and they serve for 6 years. And then the president is elected by an electoral college, the members of which cannot be elected officials. And the president serves for 4 years. So we have 3 different jobs elected 3 different ways by 3 different groups of people. That was the original design, and we already screwed it up with the 17th Amendment and making senators popularly elected.
Yeah, I never knew that about senators.
Yeah, originally in the Constitution, they were appointed by state legislatures.
Which would
That
make
was
sense.
changed.
Like, you're voting these people in because you trust them. They're the closest person to you. They live in your neighborhood, and you're going to trust them with your best interest.
Right. That was the idea. And part of the idea also was that, remember, we were supposed to be sovereign states and
Yeah.
a federal government of limited powers. Who better to check the federal government than people that were elected by the state governments. A senator who has to report back to his state legislature is more likely to stand up for state rights
Yeah.
against a massive federal government. We lost independent state sovereignty the moment that we ratified the 17th Amendment and changed how senators were elected.
It seems like senators and even people in the House don't care about the district that they were voted into. They're a national, politician. They're worried about the entire nation. They're not paying attention to the people that actually voted them in.
Right, right. But if the Senate acted the way it was supposed to and was still elected the way originally, the way they were supposed to, if they were elected by their state legislatures, your state government appointed your state senators, your senators at the federal level, then your House of Representatives could act more in the interest of the representative because they would have the backing of their state in the other chamber. It would be far less of a national role because all right, first off, as a state senator, you're elected by however many millions of people that are in your state. The old days, you were elected by the couple hundred that were in your state house. You didn't do your job, they could recall you. You might not have your job for 6 years. But unfortunately, it was actually the states that wanted the 17th Amendment. They were having trouble. If a state house was equally divided, they couldn't get a majority for any one person. Senate seats would sit vacant for months and months.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah,
It'd be great. I would love that. Anytime they threaten to shut down the government, I'm like, please.
Yeah, right. Me too. And I work for the federal government. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was it. So the Electoral College is a absolutely necessary check that keeps our government from becoming a democracy. It keeps us a representative republic. And what most people have a problem with is not the Electoral College itself. It is the state rules. See, each state gets to decide how to appoint their elector, how to award their electoral votes. But somehow we've gotten to the point that all but 2 states award them in a winner-take-all fashion, which I think is all of the problems that people perceive coming from the Electoral College. I think Nebraska's got the right method. I think the Nebraska method, if it were adopted nationwide, would be a beautiful thing. They award 2 of their electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote in their state, and the rest of their electoral votes are awarded by congressional district. So not only is it far fewer people disenfranchised, i.e., I'm the one Republican in a completely Democrat county or the one Democrat in a completely Republican county. Not only does it limit that, but it also opens up the opportunity for third-party candidates, independent candidates, constitutionalists, libertarians, Green Party, to actually win electoral votes.
Yeah, which would be so good. Having a third party and a fourth party, having multiple parties would just be, this is the first election where the libertarians actually played a role. Trump went to the Libertarian National Convention and he promised to free Ross Ulbricht. And he did it.
He promised,
and
he promised to
and
put a
he even
libertarian.
said in his tweet, he's like, I don't know him, I don't really care about him, but I told you I would do it, and I did.
Yeah.
And to me, like, we got something done. We saved a human life. We united a family again. Like, that's a big deal. It may just sound like, it's one pardon, but the principle that, like, he recognized that we were a major voting bloc within this country, and he was willing to give us some concessions. At one point, he was talking about one of his promises was to put a libertarian in his cabinet. And it doesn't sound like that's going to happen. The Libertarian Party wanted the Department of Education, but he's talking about abolishing the Department of Education. So it's like, hey, man, you're doing our job for us. We didn't even need to have anybody in there. I'll take that any day of the week. How about Canada? Can Canada join the Union as a state, as a territory? Like, where are we going with this?
That's a really, really interesting conversation. And personally, I don't care one way or another whether they do.
I kind of don't want them. These people are used to a massive social safety net, and I don't want to have more of that. We've got enough social safety net in this country already.
Right. If you want an honest to goodness personal answer, I would say, sure, bring them in, but don't bring them in as one country. Bring them in by province.
That'd be better.
Because they're not all completely lefty, commie, Justin Trudeau types.
No.
There are some very conservative, libertarian-leaning folks on the western side of Canada, where there isn't much population, but give them a whole state, then all right.
Vancouver is beautiful. I went to Vancouver once for a day, and whew.
The interesting constitutional discussion about Canada goes all the way back to the Articles of Confederation. So the Articles of Confederation spelled out the rules for how a territory could become a state. But they had an exception to those rules, an explicit written exception for Canada that said, come on in. Canada didn't have to meet any requirements. All they had to do is say, yes, we'd like to be a state. Now, you think about this, this was, during the American Revolution. We were kind of hoping to get the Canadians on our side, more troops and all that kind of stuff, and fight the revolution. So then, you go forward 10 years and the Constitution gets ratified. The Constitution, again, spells out the rules for how to create a state, but does not address the exception that had been listed for Canada. So, because the Constitution is silent on that exception, there is an interesting constitution and legal discussion. Does that exception from the Articles of Confederation still hold true today? So, if that's true, if it does, and that would, again, that would have to be fought out through the courts.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, if you have a legal document that is replaced with another legal document, anything that's not listed in the second document that was listed in the first, what was written in the first is still valid.
That makes sense.
So theoretically, Canada could say, sure, we'll become a state, and they wouldn't have to go through the big, long process that normally is required.
Interesting. I don't know a ton about the Revolutionary War. Did they sit it out? Were they just kind of like, we're going to wait and see how this happens? I, as you were talking about that, I was wondering why they never joined the Union when it happened. Did the framers be like, hey, you guys didn't show up when we needed you, so you can fend for yourselves?
Actually, it's a little worse than that. When it became clear that they weren't going to join our side, we tried to invade them.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
It failed, obviously. And but yeah, for the most part, they kind of sat it out. They weren't real involved. They were loyal to the king, but not like actively loyal, I guess. They weren't like saying, yeah, we'll help. Let's go kill them Americans.
Yeah. Free riders, man. They've been living rent free in our guest house their entire existence. Just freeloaders.
Yeah. Yeah, we tried to invade. That was a failure.
So tariffs versus income tax. I'm torn on this one. I don't know enough about economics to really take a strong stance on this. I've heard good arguments from free market capitalists saying it's a bad idea. I've heard arguments from other free market capitalists saying, let's give it a shot. I think that we've been, as far as I know, the income tax is unconstitutional. I think I had a video of that or whatever, but I'd like to see what happens. Personally, let's run a test case on this and see how it works. What do you think?
We don't need to run a test case. Until 1913, our government was basically funded by tariffs.
Yeah.
So we've got...
And that was the most productive time of any country in the history of the world.
Right. So, look back at our own American history from 1787 to 1913. There was no income tax. All of the money that went into the federal government was tariffs and imposts, and maybe some excise taxes. Now we have all of the above. We have tariffs and imposts and excise and income tax and inheritance tax and capital gains tax
Yeah.
and like every other form of tax you can imagine. And we're still broke. We're still, trillions of dollars in debt. My thought is, again, back to the Constitution. I'm not an economist either. I'm not an expert on education. I'm not an expert on anything except maybe what the Constitution says and what the framers meant when they wrote it.
Mhm.
The Constitution says that any direct tax has to be apportioned by population. Back before the 16th Amendment, before 1913, if the federal government wanted money from the states, the bill that they gave each state had to be based on the population of that state. That seems pretty freaking fair to me.
Yeah.
Why can't we go back to that?
Because we've
So
been
then
doing it this way for so long.
Well, no, it's not because we've been doing it this way for so long. It's because we've been doing it this way so long, and it's so freaking easy.
Yeah.
See, now, after 1930, they decided, we'll just reach right into your paycheck and take it before you even get it.
Yeah.
And we went along with it as a people. Should never have done it. I personally, I'm one of those that I still believe that even though there is the 16th Amendment authorizing income tax, I don't think that the authorization of income tax, I think it violates the clause that says that direct taxes have to be apportioned by population. I think that the amendment itself is unconstitutional because it doesn't address that in the amendment. There's nothing in there that says, in lieu of direct apportionment, we're going to do this. Like, it doesn't mention the apportionment at all. So I think it's unconstitutional in that way. There's a lot of other people that say it's unconstitutional for other ways. Some say that never really passed Congress, the Senate specifically. That goes back to the fact that it was passed on, the 23rd of December or something like that, right? Whenever everybody was running home for Christmas.
Yeah.
And, did they all
I
sign
hate it when they do that. Hey, we have to vote, otherwise we can't go on our holiday. And they just
F
force
your
people
holiday.
to vote the worst way. Ugh,
Right.
Hate that.
And then, and they wait. They wait until then. You know what? You knew when you were elected.
Yeah. And that's when you get the bills with all the pork in them, just
Right,
these
exactly.
massive fucking bills.
Yep. That looked like this big fat constitution, thousands of pages long.
Yeah.
Nobody read. And and I agree. I mean, when every year the fiscal year ends the same day every year, but yet every year, continuing resolution.
Yep.
Continuing, and they get right up until Christmas.
Yep. And if we did zero-based budgeting, they wouldn't be able to do that.
I know they wouldn't get any money until they wrote a budget.
Exactly.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it would. You know what's been the funniest part about the tariff, freak out of the left and just everybody who's freaking out by tariffs? You would think that nobody was enforcing tariffs on anybody in the world, and Donald Trump just came up with this idea that, hey, we're going to do tariffs now. But when you look into it, we get tariffed like crazy. You know,
yeah.
You can buy a Mercedes in any country, in any city in this country,
right
today. But if you live in
find
Europe,
a Chevy anywhere in Europe.
Yeah, try and buy a Corvette in Europe. Good luck.
Uh-huh.
That's something, right?
Well, look at what Canada does to our dairy products.
Yeah.
We were freaking out because we're going to put a 25% tariff on Canadian imports. They have like a 300% tariff on some of the stuff that we send them.
Yeah, and a lot of Canadians are traveling to the U.S. to buy groceries right now.
That's sad.
That's very sad, right? Like Detroit area, people are coming down. They're shopping in Detroit. They're not shopping in Canada anymore.
Here's a little something that I noticed a couple of weeks ago. I've been out of work for a couple of weeks. I had an operation a couple of weeks ago.
I hope you're doing okay.
I'm not allowed to lift anything, so that makes my job as a mailman difficult.
Yeah.
So I've been off. Um, I've been eating a lot of eggs, a lot of breakfasts, and you go to the store and eggs are, $6.50 for a dozen eggs. But somehow I noticed, for some reason, like the cage-free hen-raised brown eggs are only like $4.
That's weird.
They're usually the really expensive ones.
Yeah.
But apparently, for something, I don't know if whatever eggs or whatever chickens lay the brown eggs are a different species and they weren't affected by the slaughtering that happened or
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, it was funny that these fancy eggs were 50% cheaper. So I've been buying those. Little heads up to anybody out there before
Yeah.
you grab your dozen of regular old white large eggs.
Or
take a
even
look at them.
better, get in touch with your community and find somebody
find
in your
somebody-
neighborhood who's harvesting eggs, because they're everywhere, especially here in Idaho. We people do chickens here and they sell their eggs. I live in such a great state. People actually put egg carts or different carts for different stuff out in their lawns, and they just do the honor policy. Drop your money into the jar, take your eggs, have a good day,
Yep.
I saw a video of Costco earlier today with a Mexican family who had one of those, the long carts, not the cart, but the flatbed carts. They had that fucker stacked all the way to the top with eggs. And other people were losing their minds because they bought all the eggs. All right, we're going to get out of here. I've got one more video I want to play because I saw this on the internet the other day. You've already seen it, but I want to play it for the podcast because this lady's funny.
All right.
Thinking, there's MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. MAGA, Make America Great Again. But what we really need to do is make America follow the Constitution again. Motherfucker.
I agree, but 150%.
That
Absolutely.
Oh, man. All right, we're going to get out of here. Pete, it's been a pleasure. I always love having you on. You're a wealth of information. You shouldn't be a mailman anymore. This should be your full-time job.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've never been able to become successful